Happy Inauguration Day. Here in the United States, this is a really big day for us, January 20th. This is the day that we, most of us, are going to be welcoming the 46th President, Joe Biden. In celebration of today, I'm going to tell you about George Washington and what I think he would have been like as a student in one of my classes. We're wasting time. Hello, Hotties. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. I'm Ali Mack, and I am currently a 7th grade math teacher. While you're here, please click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any other videos from me. Do it now. So I decided to start a whole new series of talking about presidents of the United States and what I would predict they would be like as one of my students. It seems like no matter how many kids you teach, over the years you start to see repeated types of students. So basically, the goal is to tell you about one of our United States presidents and then tell you at the end what I think that kid would have been like as a student. So you're going to want to stick around to the very end to hear what I have to say about that. In celebration of Joe Biden's inauguration, I wanted to start this series and tell you as much as I could and as much as I know about George Washington. In fact, George Washington's inauguration took place on April 30th, 1789. And after this, inaugurations from 1793 until 1933 were held on March 4th. In those days, they needed the 4 months to count the votes, recount the votes, and travel to the Capitol to report the votes. And to be honest, these procedures seem to be working okay until after the 1860 election. This is when President Abraham Lincoln won the election in 1860. And this is when 7 states left the Union. The sitting president, the one that was about to go on his way out, did nothing about it. And President-elect Abraham Lincoln was coming in, so at the time he didn't have any power. James Buchanan did nothing, and he just left it for Abraham Lincoln. So I'm telling you all that to tell you the reason why we now have it on January 20th is technology has gotten better, reporting doesn't take as long, and the 20th Amendment was ratified. And this basically moved Inauguration Day up to January 20th. So in this video, like I stated earlier, I'm going to tell you about George Washington. I'm going to tell you a little bit about his Inauguration Day. I'm going to tell you the things that he's remembered for good things and the not so good things. I'm going to tell you what he was like as a person, the good things and the not so good things. And I also would love to share some trivia and fun facts with you about George Washington. At the very end, I'm going to tell you what I think he would be like as a student. So I told you all that to say I'm ready when you are. Since today, the day this video is published, is Inauguration Day in the United States, let's talk about George Washington's inauguration. So one thing that I found fun is for his first inauguration, he actually had to borrow money to go. When he was in front of the crowds of people, his demeanor was stately, modest, and deeply affecting. He would put his hand over his heart, and he bowed several times to the crowd. And although he earned a reputation of being fierce on the battlefield, he made an informed decision not to wear his uniform to the inauguration. In fact, beyond that, because he did not want the public, his constituents, to fear a military coup. The inauguration took place at the building at Wall and Nassau Streets, I hope I'm saying that second street correctly, that had long served as New York City Hall. When the balcony ceremony concluded, he went in with Congress to give his inaugural speech. In fact, the funny thing is with this address, they all stood as he entered, but then they seated as he got ready to talk to them. This was trying to cut ties from the way King George did things, where people would stand the entire time of the speech. This showed that the president and the legislative branches were equal. So basically, when he started talking, he seated Congress immediately. Now, his first draft of the inauguration speech was like 73 pages long, but with some good advice, they were told, no, that's way too long. So basically, he went in very nervous and he told them that he did not feel like he was fit to be the president. And he shared his anxiety about the job. So now we're at the part in the video. Let me give you some background of George Washington before he became the president and reached his inauguration day. It said that one of Washington's first acts upon taking command of the Continental Army in 1775 was to hire a spy to go behind enemy lines and report on British activities in Boston. We always hear of President Washington being so honest and truthful, but apparently he did what he needed to do in order to win this war. So he basically devoted a bunch of energy to his role as intelligence chief. He even used his own personal funds to pay for this information. After the end of the war, the former colonies operated under the Articles of Confederation. Basically, this document placed all the power within the states, but there was problems with this. So the states all printed their own money, there was no national leader, and the individual states were not supporting themselves as like the whole country. And this new nation that they created seemed to be in trouble. In 1787, state representatives gathered in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania at the Constitutional Convention to fix these problems. There were delegates that wrote the Constitution of the United States, and this document created a strong federal government, which we Americans all know and love today. And in fact, the Constitution still serves as the foundation for the United States government. So basically, based on the Constitution's directions, it chose representatives to elect a president, and Washington won the vote. And this made him the first elected president of the United States. Now, John Adams received the second most votes. Back in those days, when you had two people running against each other, the person with the most votes would get the presidency, and the person with the second amount of votes would get the vice presidency. Now, all of my American friends, you can think of some of the pairs that would have been if they wouldn't have changed this. Could you imagine Hillary Clinton serving as Donald Trump's vice president? Whew. Anyway, in George Washington's first annual message to Congress, Washington requested a secret service fund that would be controlled by the president and would allow the chief executive to conduct secret operations free from congressional oversight. The president's request was actually approved at Congress in 1790 with the support of Representative James Madison. And with it was the granted authority to avoid the usual reporting procedures mandated by Congress. The president was in essence given a blank check to conduct secret operations that he alone deemed to be in the national interest. So there's that. That's something I absolutely did not know before doing this research. Now we're at the part in the video where I'm going to share with you some positive attributes of George Washington. Some you may not know. I know some of these I did not know. In fact, those were the ones I decided to put in my script, was the things that I did not know. So let's start with the good. George Washington's legacy is that he was an international symbol for liberation and nationalism, and as the leader of the first successful revolution against a colonial empire. Another thing that I found very sweet is he raised his wife's children like they were his own children. Another good trait, he never abused his power, or at least there's no record of it. George Washington became the only sitting president to personally lead troops into battle, which I think is pretty cool and pretty macho, right? Okay, so let me share with you some of the things that aren't so good attributes of George Washington. He owned slaves, this is no secret. And to preserve national unity, he supported measures passed by Congress to protect slavery. He was actually very troubled with the institution of slavery, and he actually freed his slaves in his will. Another not so positive attribute is said that in George Washington's early military career, he was not good at negotiating surrenders, he was not good at choosing high grounds for his forts, he couldn't read French, which unfortunately all gentlemen could read French, and he was not good at admitting when he was in way over his head. That sounds like most men I know. And they said that he was good at shifting the blame towards other people. Another thing that I found kind of disturbing is his dentures. We all know by now that he did not really have wooden teeth. But what we now know is that his teeth were made out of a lot of things. Not wood. They came largely from human teeth, pulled out of the mouths of poor people and enslaved people, which I think is horrible. And then some of his teeth came from ivory, cow teeth, and lead. Okay, so now we're at the part in the video where I share with you some fun facts. I could do all videos about fun facts. George Washington was American, but he had English ancestry, and because of that, he spoke with an English accent. I think that is so cool. I don't know why, but I find that very fascinating. Another fun fact, George Washington actually ruined his teeth by cracking open walnuts with them. So any children watching, my mom used to always tell me when I would open stuff with my teeth, she'd say, "You need to stop that, you're gonna ruin your teeth." Too bad George Washington's mother didn't tell him that. Another thing is his fake teeth caused him great discomfort and were one of the reasons he rarely smiled. His hair, we all know that he has white hair, but it wasn't white. He just powdered it to make it look white. I guess this was a style back in those days. Now, George Washington was also not just the first president of the United States, he was actually known as being the first mule breeder. And in case you don't know, a mule is a mix between a horse and a donkey. This one I like. They say George Washington was very hard to kill. It says he survived multiple life-threatening situations. He survived having his horse shot under him twice. They say he was really hard to kill. Here's another one that I found interesting. There was a law passed to make Washington the highest-ranking U.S. officer of all time. General of the armies of the United States. Nobody will ever outrank him. And they said that because he did so much to contribute to the formation of our societies that no one should ever be allowed to outrank him. I get it. On February 4th, 1789, the 69 members of the Electoral College made George Washington the only chief executive to be unanimously elected. So all the votes went to George Washington. George Washington is the reason presidents can only serve for a certain amount of time. He said that this would prevent them from becoming too powerful, like the King of England. George never served as president in Washington, D.C. The actual capital of the United States was in Philadelphia at the time. He never lived in the White House. In fact, he is the only president that did not live in the White House, which I thought was pretty fascinating. Our first president didn't live in the White House? Okay, I like this quote. George Washington's inability to tell a lie is a lie. Apparently, he was very good at lying. And they say he was an avid spy master with a talent for deception that would remain unequaled by American presidents for the next 150 years. I never knew that he was sneaky and he had all this spying and things like that going on. I'm gonna check to see if anyone's made a movie about George Washington, because I found this fascinating. We always hear of George Washington, but when do we ever really look up the little details of his life? Which is why I'm glad I started this series, because I want to know about the American presidents. You know, they say history repeats itself. Okay, so another thing, his military strategy was to outsmart and outlast the enemy, not outfight him. Hey, that kind of sounds like the art of war to me. He used intelligence to avoid more battles than he fought and to trick the British into standing down when standing up could have meant the end of the Continental Army. Last fun fact I'm going to share with you. During the Revolutionary War, Washington was referred to by his secret code number 711. So he had a secret code. Now, we are at the part in the video where I thank you for sticking around to the very end. Now I'm going to share with you my personal assessment of what type of student George Washington would have been if he was sitting in my 7th grade math class. Well, since we know that George Washington was athletic and intelligent and especially good at math, he took classes like trigonometry. That tells me he would have been like a jock, a smart jock. Perhaps the captain of the football team, but still kept his grades up so he could play. And the fact that he was so intelligent and didn't receive a formal education makes me wonder how intelligent would he have been had he had that formal education. They said his father passed away when he was 11, and his mom was going to send him to England to get formal school, but that just didn't happen. It fell through. And he was very, very embarrassed about his lack of education. He was mostly educated at home. So I think if he would have been in an education-rich environment, he would have really thrived. I really think he would have been an honor roll student. Maybe not all A's, but at least A's and B's. He would have done what he needed to do to be able to play his sports. And the fact that he was stern and he was a leader means he would have been the kid that teachers needed to get on their side. That way, that leader of the class could lead the other students in the right direction because they'd want to do what he was able to do. And the fact that George Washington was known to be a hard worker means I wouldn't have had to stay on him to do his assignments. I wouldn't have had to keep reminding or calling his parents to say, hey, George did not do his homework. I don't believe I would have had to do that if George Washington was my student. My assessment would be that George Washington, if he was a student in my middle school class, he would be the jock, the guy's guy, but also very intelligent. He would be well liked by his peers. Have to watch him though, because he would be sneaky, try to play this good boy thing and get away with stuff behind the scenes. I love those types of kids. All right, that is it for this video. If you found it helpful, informative, or even entertaining, please like, share, and subscribe. Comment below the American flag emoji. And as always, you all have the best day ever, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.